Welcome everyone, Christine here on Serious Gaming with a beginner's guide and a crash fix guide for Call of Duty Warzone, the free-to-play battle royale version of Modern Warfare, which pretty much requires you to install Modern Warfare, so be prepared for a pretty big install of 85 gigs, which is pretty frustrating to deal with, but hey, that's their decision. So in terms of dealing with the crash issue, which a lot of people have struggled with, you want to go to your options menu in graphics and ensure that your display mode is set to full screen. This is what fixed the crash issue for me personally, and I was pretty much getting a crash every single match. On top of that, you might also consider setting a render resolution the same as your display resolution over here. So make sure that's set up. I don't know what's up with that. That's a bit of a bug, by the way, here in the options menu. There we go. Aspect ratio wide 16:19. VSync off. A lot of people have recommended this, that disabling this VSync, lowering video options can help. You will also be told by the game that you should update your video drivers, so be it AMD or NVIDIA, update your video drivers. You can do a clean install or use the driver uninstaller, completely remove your graphics drivers and then install new ones, the latest version from scratch. I didn't do that. I didn't find it necessary, and I have a GTX 980, so an NVIDIA GPU, and that didn't really affect it for me. On top of that, you can also make sure that whenever you're playing the game, that the priority in the task manager is set to normal as opposed to high. The game, every time it starts, will set itself to high, or will try to. That's how it works. You can set it to normal to help with stability. Some of these will work for you, some won't. For me, the full screen change work. For other people disabling VSync or changing the priority work. So check it out if you're dealing with crash issues. Now, in terms of the actual game itself, your kill streak selection and your field upgrades won't matter in the slightest, but your loadout will absolutely do so. In terms of guns, let's start with assault rifles. The M4A1 is generally considered the best assault rifle in the game, by far and away the best. It's been nerfed compared to past versions, but it still retains that #1 spot. In second place, however, is the M13 from what I've read. And the reason this matters is, although the M4 is the best, you won't find it all that much on the map. You can find some epic or legendary versions of it, but lower version of it, not so much. Whereas M13s will be all over the place, be it in white, green, blue quality. So you can get a lot of M13s, and it's really a gun worth using if you don't have the M4, but you do want the M4 as part of your loadout. For SMGs, it's either the MP5 or the MP7, both of which will be quite common. Though on the higher end of the spectrum of things that you can get in a match, you will find P90s or PP19 Bisons. I'm not saying I'd recommend using them, but a legendary gun is still a legendary gun, and that is quite useful. For shotguns, the 7.25 or the Origin 12 are the recommendations. The 7.25 has longer range, can kill people from a longer range, and is quite useful in that respect, and surprises people with respect to how far it can shoot, whereas the Origin 12 has capacity and rate of fire. So if you want something to shoot a lot of people with, or shoot very quickly, go with the Origin 12. If you want something for longer range damage, the 7.25. The most commonly found shotgun in the game, though, will be the R90. That's the one I found the most. I haven't put it in a loadout at all, but I've still leveled it up to level 23 just because of how common this shotgun is on the actual map. For LMGs, the one I found the most is the SA87, but the M91 is considered the best by far and away. Capacity is very high, damage is high, accuracy is high, is very much worth using as an LMG. For marksman rifles, and really for sniper rifles as well, you could go with that, is the Kar 98K, the legendary Kar 98K. Very good gun, very solid weapon. You can use it as a marksman rifle, but really it's pretty much a sniper rifle, regardless of how you cut it. So consider that. If you want something more traditional, something more modern, I guess, you can go with an AX-50 or a Dragunov. That's what people recommend. So that's your decision in terms of guns. But what about everything else? Well, in terms of your tactical choice, yes, you do have various grenades, smoke grenade, stun grenade, gas grenade, stim, etc. But a heartbeat sensor will be so very useful, especially because the way that people play in Battle Royale, they won't have a way to protect themselves. Now, some players will, but not everyone, so it makes it very useful, especially when you consider some of the perks. Perk-wise, I personally like double time. They can also go with EOD if you so desire, but just having that extra sprint, in my opinion, is very useful. But many other choices are viable here. Just go with whatever you personally prefer. I also like Tracker. It's quite useful in terms of knowing where certain enemies are. But the main one that does matter, the go-to, the default option for virtually everyone is Overkill, because this gives you two primary weapons as part of your loadout. So in this case, I have an assault rifle and I have an SMG. The assault rifle is for medium or long range. The MP7 is for short range, for inside houses. I could go with a shotgun as well. I could switch various things around here, but that's my personal preference over here. And Overkill helps you because you can get two good quality weapons as part of your loadout as opposed to one. But here's the catch. There are other perks that are also worth it. So in the second loadout over here, I have a Dusk, which is an LMG, just basically a special version of the LMG I was talking about earlier. But what matters here as part of the loadout is I have Ghost. Ghost makes you undetectable by UAV, radar drones, and heartbeat sensors. This doesn't matter as much in the beginning of a match, but it is absolutely critical in the later stages of a match, when the area shrinks, when we're finding where someone is just as critical as just getting in a shooting match and winning with against them. So having that kind of protection from EAVs, from heartbeat sensors, is quite important. People can and will get the jump on you when you're not prepared for it. I've had that happen to myself. I've done it to other people. So getting Ghost is useful. Now, like other Battle Royale titles, Call of Duty Warzone throws you on a big map against a large number of enemy players, up to 150 in this case, and they recently added solo play for it, so you can have matches of 100 people on their own. It's a big free-for-all, big brawl. If you're playing with other people in a team of 3, my first recommendation is just disable voice comms. You can ping areas, you can type what people should do if you have a mouse and keyboard. You can do those things. And if people aren't gonna listen, aren't gonna care to the things you're pinging or the things you're typing, they probably won't listen to what you have to tell them in voice comms, or what you're yelling at them in voice comms. They can be useful, but from my experience with random people, it's just not worth the trouble. A lot of people have banned microphones. A lot of people are not gonna listen regardless. Those are the kind of issues that you're dealing with in a random group. So don't bother with it. I know it can sound counterproductive, but that's just my impression. Just don't deal with voice comms in a random group. Deal with them when you have a coordinated team. As for the game, the difference between other battle royales is that you don't really have an inventory system. Your armor is just basically 3 bars that you can fill up using armor plates, and you can carry 5 of those plates with you. You also have grenades, both lethal and non-lethal. The heartbeat sensor occupies the non-lethal grenade slot if you want it. There is a lot of gun customization, all kinds of different weapons, different quality to those weapons that you can find. Now, you can play this like you would play other battle royales, where there are certain hotspots where you will find crates with loot far more frequently, where you'll find loot more frequently. There's even some secrets. The military base or some military outpost has an area that can't be opened unless you have some code. I'm really curious about that. But you can play like you would other battle royales. You drop in a hotspot, you fight for survival, or you drop far away and you go pick up loot. And you won't get as much as some people will in those hotspots, but that doesn't matter because you're safe and you can survive longer. So that's how you can play a lot of battle royales. The difference in Call of Duty Warzone is the cache system and the store system inside the game. So with cash, you can buy kill streaks, you can buy gas masks, armor plates, you can get your loadout, so your weapons, you can get the ones that you customize yourself, you can get those. And my recommendation is to do so. Now, cash can be found throughout the world. You can find it on the ground, you can find it in supply crates, and if you go in those hotspots, you'll get a lot of cash for loadout, self-revive kits, all that kind of stuff. So that's one way of playing the game. The other way is to do objectives to get cash by completing those objectives. And the more objectives you complete, the more contracts, as they're called, you complete, the higher the rewards. You might start with just getting a bit of cash initially, but the more contracts you do, the more money you will receive. So it is certainly worth doing. There are 3 types of contracts. Assassination bounty contracts, where an enemy player is going to be marked for you, or the general area of an enemy player is going to be marked for you, and you're supposed to go there, find them, kill them, and you will get rewards from that on top of the usual loot that you'll get from what that player is carrying. Then you have recon contracts, which may seem less useful, but critically, and very importantly for the later stages of any match, they will show you the next circle. So when the area is shrinking and you don't know how it's shrinking, getting that kind of information can be quite a significant advantage, because you can get there earlier, you can find the safe spot, you can avoid getting sniped in the back as you're trying to move frantically because you're out of time and the circle is pretty far away. So that's the kind of stuff that's useful about that. Then you have scavenge contracts. Scavenger contracts will just send you to find certain supply crates that won't exist until you pick up the contract. And you get some good loot, you can get some good weapons, kill streaks, all that. The important thing is you can get a lot of money, and it's the easiest way of getting money. Recon requires you to go do a capture the flag scenario, which can be risky. Bounty requires you to kill another enemy player, which can be risky. Scavenge just requires you to go from point A to point B, find the crate, find 3 crates, and that's it. And you can gain a lot of money. So, as opposed to dropping in hotspots, my recommendation for a lot of people, especially new players, would be to play the contract game. So go to scavenge contracts initially. Find an area when you're dropping in on a map. Find an area, check the map, and find an area where you have, which might be out of the way, which is a bit safe, but does have a lot of scavenge contracts. I mean, if you feel confident about it, drop in an area that's a hotspot like downtown or airport or anything like that, where you might have contracts, but just look at the map because it's going to change. Look at the map, see where the contracts are, see what kind of contracts there are over there. Doing scavenging contracts in the beginning of each match is very useful. Later on, you can do recon and assassination bounty contracts, which of course will give you advantages later on, like, hey, telling you where a certain player is when there's not that many people left on the map is very bloody useful. Knowing where the next circle is very useful. But getting the weapons, the armor early on from the scavenge contract is a big bonus. And then using the money by completing those contracts, using the money you gained to get your loadout. You want to get 2 loadout crates. You can get some random loadout crates dropping on the map. That will happen. But they do tend to be a bit of a death trap, because it's not just for you, it's also for other players. So that's going to attract attention. Generally, you want to get your own loadout crates, 1, 2, given what I've talked about loadouts before. And you want to get a UAV is very useful, or a kill streak, a cluster of missiles, or airstrike, precision strike. On top of that, self-revive kit, munitions box, all that kind of stuff, gas mask, etc. Very useful stuff to do with your cash. And that's one of the ways you can really play the game. That's what my personal recommendation would be, especially for new players. Get used to the objectives. Get used to dealing with the objectives. Don't drop in an area because, that area has more crates. You can do that, but also consider, well, what kind of objectives are in that area? What can I gain from those objectives? And do scavenge contracts early on, do recon and assassination contracts later on, and you will get quite far. And I mention all of this because I see a lot of players that don't care about it, that really don't give a damn about it when the benefits are so obvious. I mean, if you're dropping an area that's out of the way that doesn't have a lot of loot, for instance, which a lot of people do that are new to the game, why not do a scavenge contract? It will give you more loot, more money, and you can use all of that. But your goal should be to gain as much money as possible early on, use that money for your loadouts, for your perks, for your kill streaks, for your armor plates, for your ammo, etc. Use all of that. That should be your objective. That's how to play the game, in my opinion. Playing the cash game. I mean, sure, there's a whole mode called Plunder, but this is different. Like, I'm talking here purely Battle Royale. And that would be my recommendation for people starting out. Get used to playing the objective. That's the smart way of doing it. Because you do gain an inherent advantage when you have kill streaks, when you have loadout, when you have armor, when you have gas mask. When you have all of these things, you gain an inherent advantage over people that don't. And many people don't bother. Or they don't bother as much as they should. Finally, when it comes to dropping out of the plane and using the parachute, you can deploy the parachute very quickly and you will be able to cover a very large distance thanks to that. Though, of course, you will also be very slow in terms of getting to the ground, in which case you might have a nasty surprise when you do get there. You can refuse to deploy the parachute until the very last moment, and so you'll get to the ground very quickly, but the distance you cover will be small indeed. Or you can do what I personally prefer, which is to use the parachute as a means of slowing down. So the parachute will slow you down to a speed of about 10, as opposed to the terminal velocity of an actual drop. So what I prefer doing is I deployed the parachute, I slow down, then I cut it, so and accelerate to about 50 or so, or however much you want, before deploying it again. That way I can cover a fairly reasonable distance without having to spend the entire trip to the ground using the parachute. So that would be my personal recommendation in regards to it. Just depends on where you want to drop. You don't want to go in the plane's direct path. A lot of people will drop along that way. Just go somewhere to the side. The further away, the better, and keep in mind the objectives. That's all I had to say on this. Questine here signing out, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Special thanks to Phillip, to all my patrons, and to all of you who make it possible. Stay tuned for more. I'm quite enjoying this game with all the crazy things that are going on around the world right now.